In this video, we will discuss about DNA damage repair deficient tumors. That is tumors that does not have the capability to repair any DNA damage, and this condition is usually exist or in the cancer tumors. And in order to cure this or in order to treat this, there is a therapy that has been developed, that is platinum chemotherapy. So what platinum chemotherapy does, in order to cure DNA damage repair, there is a signaling pathway that needs to be activated. That is PARP activation. And this PARP activation will leads to DNA repair, and then cells will survive. However, the side effect of it is that if there is a significant DNA damage, or that leads to overactivation of PARP, and this overactivation of PARP will leads to NAD depletion. Why this happens? Because PARP requires the recruitment of NAD plus in order to for its function, in order to do its function. So overactivation of PARP will leads to NAD depletion, and this leads to ATP depletion. And as we know that ATP is one of the major source of energy for cells, and this might lead to cell death. So there is always a balance that need to be maintained. However, that thing is still not been efficiently achieved. Let us understand the DNA damage repair and what are the major uh, three major one can say possibilities. First one is if the DNA damage is minor, what it will leads to, it will leads to PARP activation, and then it will leads to DNA repair and cell will survive. However, if DNA damage is unrepairable, then it might activate P53 pathway, P53 uh, pathway that activates apoptosis, because P53 plays around with between whether it needs to go for DNA damage repair or it needs to go for apoptosis based on the degree of DNA damage. So if DNA damage is unrepairable, it will the P53, it will instruct P53 to activate apoptosis pathway. So in this case, the PARP activation will not be that much efficient. So this insufficient DNA repair might lead to apoptosis with the help of P53. And the third one is the major DNA damage repair. What happens, as we have already go through this thing in this graph, is that in case of major DNA damage repair, it will lead to PARP overactivation, and this will lead to depletion of NAD and ATPs. However, in this video I have said that it leads to cell death, but if we go in detail, it actually might lead to necrosis. So what is this necrosis? Necrosis is just the death of the tissue because of low flow of blood. And we know that if there are less ATP and NAD, then cells will have less energy, and because of this, cells will not be able to function properly, or uh, and this in cascade effect might ultimately lead to low blood flow rate, and this leads to uh, necrosis in the nearby area, or we can say that death of the tissue because of low blood flow rate. So now let us just quickly go over through how this platinum chemotherapy works. So this is suppose this is the DNA, double stranded DNA, and we can see that here A is we know that A always binds with T and C always binds with G. So here we see that A binds with T and C binds here again C is present. So we need to repair this. So in order to do this, the platinum based uh, chemotherapy is used. It will binds to this binds to this abnormal DNA, or we can say the DNA damage, and then it will recruit this NAD, that is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide substrate. It will recruit this and form a poly-ADP ribose, a long chain of poly-ADP ribose. And all this process is known as PARP activation, that is poly-ADP ribose polymerase activation. So when this platinum is bind with DNA damage part, and then recruitment of NAD substrate will leads to long chain of poly ADP ribose. And what it will does is it will recruit more enzymes that are responsible for repairing of DNA damage. As we can see that this PARP is be represented by this orange color, and then green is represented by repair enzyme. So it will PARP will recruit more repair enzyme towards the area where DNA is damaged. And one more thing that this process is does is, in case this PARP is inhibited by PARP1, this this platinum chemotherapy induced DNA damage, platinum chemotherapy will activate this PARP by removing this PARP1 that is inhibiting the PARP. Also, it is slightly confusing that PARP is the pathway that needs to be activated in order to recruit the repair enzymes. However, PARP1 is the uh, substrate that inactivates the PARP. So this platinum chemotherapy does both the things. It activates the PARP pathway at the same time. Because of the activation of PARP pathway, it will recruit more repair enzymes. So that's how platinum chemotherapy works in a broad perspective. We are not going into detail in this video. For more detail, you can refer to the reference that is provided in the description. Thank you for your time.